Whether it's slashing sentences or reducing the population behind bars, criminal justice reform is now supported by a broad swath of political leaders, left, center, and right. But for the most part, the reformers and their rhetoric tend to focus on people accused or convicted of what's referred to as nonviolent offenses. It makes sense to target minor offenses for reforms, drug sentences, misdemeanors, but the way violent crimes are kept out of the reform conversation might be an obstacle to really meaningful change in the criminal justice system. For one thing, the state's prison population, as it's decreased, has a higher share of prisoners convicted of a violent offense, and the slice of that population that's doing lengthy sentences is also up. So increasingly, the incarceration phenomenon is about keeping people convicted of violent crimes locked up for long stretches of time. This skew reflects these long-standing notions we have about violence and punishment. Philosophers and policymakers have long debated the purpose of prison. What's it for? Is it to punish people, to exact revenge, to deter others from breaking the law, prevent lawbreakers from committing new crimes, rehabilitate people, some combination of these? And how do all these ideas relate to violent crime, which is a pretty broad term in itself, covering everything from muggings to murder? It's a complicated topic, and as F.T. Green reports in City Limits this week, an emotional one for victims and their families. Research offers some clarity. If the purpose of putting someone behind bars is to protect the public, a major study by the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics indicates that violent offenders who get out of prison are generally less likely to be rearrested for a violent crime than people who are in prison for a different reason. And folks who did time for the most serious offenses like murder and rape are among the least likely to get rearrested at all. Research also suggests that victims do not necessarily want the people convicted of hurting them to serve long prison sentences. Statistics also indicate that sentences in the United States tend to be longer than those in other countries, which raises a basic question. Is a 15-year sentence more effective at punishing someone or protecting the public than a 10-year one? Is a 10-year term better than a 5-year gig? Now, none of this is to suggest that violence isn't real or destructive. Even with crime at record lows, some 36,000 people were murdered, raped, robbed, or assaulted in New York City last year. But the question of how the criminal justice system responds to violence is not a theoretical one anymore. The fiscal concerns about mass incarceration aren't going to go away, especially since prisoners doing heavy sentences are more likely to become elderly prisoners, and their medical care costs the state much more. And if New York City really moves toward closing Rikers, politicians are going to have to come to grips with broader pre-trial release of people accused of violent offenses. On all levels, from jails to prisons, from trial to reentry, federal, state, and local, citizens and leaders are going to have to think harder about whether violent criminals, in quotes, are really a separate class of people.